Hey, what's up, viewers? Thanks for checking in on this video. I hope you find it useful. I'm gonna apologize in advance because I'm still slightly hungover this morning. So if I need to take a break, I got my coffee and water here. So please bear with me. But a lot of big news come out recently with Robinhood for their new checking and savings statement. So I just figured I'd do a little digging into this and give a good review of the details of what they're trying to set out in this January and give my personal opinions on some of the stuff and hopefully just give a really quick review of all the details and a quick skim for you guys. So I'll just be kind of following these little bullet points that I threw together. Hopefully make it flow a little faster than you having to go dig up all this info to hopefully it helps get right to the point. So just with that being said, I got a few reference materials here. I'll be putting these and more of the other ones that I found into the description if you want to read up on them yourselves. I might be missing some. I've been reading a lot on this last few days, so I won't have all of that, but you'll have like the general info in here. I'll include this doc as well, so that you guys can make sure to cover all of those in detail yourselves. So, oh God, I love coffee after a night out. It's just magic. So let's just go ahead and get started. Um, First thing to kick off is the overall features that they have been announced. Um, they released the news on this last Thursday, but they're expecting to actually release this feature in Robinhood in January. No specific date has been set, but they do have a count right now of how many people are already queued up to be receiving this. I guess there's a limited supply of debit cards and amount of information that they can process. So I don't know what the cutoff will be, but if you haven't queued up into that, you may want to do it sooner rather than later because I don't know how many checking accounts they will physically be able to manage. The next thing is obviously the big reason that everybody cares about this is their claim to have 3% annual interest. So we'll cover that a little further down here. But that does look like something that they could be boasting and actually somewhat cover, in my opinion. I think that's very interesting. Most other banks don't really keep up with that. So this is something kind of new. Back in, 50, 60 years ago, whatever, 3% might have been a normal rate for a bank account, but nowadays that's just outstanding. I think the rate of inflation is like 2% anyways. So you're actually making money, whereas with a lot of other banks, you're like losing money to inflation. So I believe, don't quote me on that, but I believe I read that somewhere that it was about 2% at the most recent survey. Um, Next is their large amount of ATMs. They say they have over 75,000 ATMs in their network, which means no fees for them. You can still use other ATMs that aren't in their network, but those will be subject to fees, just like any other bank, according to the information that we have. And the final thing that's actually brought up a lot of controversy the last couple of days is whether or not they will be SIPC insured, not FDIC like most banks, because this is a brokerage account. So those are kind of the main features that I'll kind of go a little more into depth a bit about. Just one at a time in these sections. So hopefully you guys find some of this useful, but a lot of this information can also be found in your Robinhood app. If you already signed up for that checking, there's a learn more section that you can go to in the app. I haven't been able to find it on the web version, so I can't really display that to you guys right now with my monitor, but it's really easy to find the new checking and savings information in your app if you want to go in and read a little more detail, because I did pull some of that into here. So without that, let's just get started on the free items that come with your account when you first start it. The first one obviously is a debit card, since it will be a checking and savings account. They have 4 different versions of them. You can do green, like their typical color for Robinhood. You can do a black one that I think is more based on like the cryptocurrency background that they do. A white one, I haven't actually seen a picture of that one yet. And the American flag. You could pick whichever one of those you want whenever you start the account. So I think that's a neat little feature. They don't have, put your own image on it, but for something that that's not really that big of a deal. Next, the account, you get an account number through Sutton Bank. Sutton Bank is, you can see down here, kind of like from Ohio is where it's really based out of. So they did partner with an actual bank to help them with, managing and processing their checking and savings transactions as far as, how to set them up and everything. So that is an actual bank that they have partnered with, not a physical location. We'll cover that later. You also get to do mail checks, mobile. You can pay your bills apparently with this. So if you have like ePay where you send an electronic check, they should be supporting that, they've claimed. Mobile and ATM check and cash deposits. So you can, if you have a check, and there have been several apps like I think Chase Pay has it where you take a picture of the check and it deposits that information into your account. They'll be supporting something similar to that, and as well as like typical ATM check and cash deposits if you find a physical ATM within their network. This one, 24/7 support. I wouldn't really put too much faith into this because they don't have a physical location or a phone line. They have online support that's 24/7. So while a lot of the minor issues that you might have with an account can get supported with just a click of freezing your debit card or something, you're not really going to be able to get a person on the other line to help you work through more complex issues. But I'm assuming that they have a very simplistic setup for navigating these issues online because they have done well with a lot of those electrical transactions as far as like their brokerage account. Next one, they do that, like I mentioned, they do the card freeze and replacement. So you can just tap a button on their system, they said, and that will freeze your card and you can select to have it replaced. It looks like that's all going to be like a preset part of their webpage or support. And that's one thing that they posted is free replacements. And finally, you also get Apple, Google, and Samsung Pay along with this. So they've kind of partnered up to get those functions in there. I personally don't use any of these, so I can't weigh in too much. But if you have it, just know that you'll be able to keep using it with this account. So next, let's just dig into some more of the details about the physical account itself. As I mentioned earlier, they partnered with Sutton Bank from Ohio. They have a few physical locations, but I don't think you can go to any of them for help with Robinhood. That's just a bank partner that they have. In the balance itself, you don't need to have a minimum in there, is what they claim. I don't know if they will go into a negative. I don't think they'll let you do that as far as like withdrawals and stuff. So I think you either have zero or something. I don't think they want to be covering you on a negative, and that's kind of why they don't have any kind of fees. I'm assuming I haven't found any evidence to support that, but based on them not having fees for stuff, I'm assuming that you will have to have zero or above, no negatives. Next, on the withdrawals for the savings, there's no max amount. Typically, banks will say you only get 5 or 6 per month for withdrawing from your savings because those are the accounts that they use to invest. So they need to have a solid amount of time and they want a more solid number in that savings account. So they limit how many transactions you can use, while the checking one is more flexible in most major banks. With Robinhood, they're saying there is no max amount of withdrawals that you can make per month. As far as the fees, like I said, they don't have a lot of the fees that most typical banks do, such like as account opening, it's free. Account maintenance, everything should be electronic. They don't really have any physical locations that people have to manage there. There's no inactivity fees, no overdraft fees, which is very impressive. No overdraft fees or late fees. That's where I'm kind of saying you probably can't have negative. I'm assuming. I could be wrong about this, but I haven't found any info. So if you guys do know about this, please comment below so I know. I'd appreciate that. No foreign transaction fees. I think that's very impressive for a new checking and savings account. It's very impressive to not have foreign transaction fees already set up. As far as like as a first release, that might be something I would have expected them to have down the line, but it's pretty cool to see if they can pull that off at opening. No check deposit fees, no return fees, no in-network ATM fees. Obviously, that's why they boast about having so many of them. But if you do have another ATM that's not in the network, you can use it. It'll just be a standard ATM fee at that point. And lastly, they don't have a physical location. So again, they're partnered with Sutton, but they are not using their locations, is what it sounds like. If you do need to go to get support, I think they only have online. They may eventually release a phone later on, but I don't really see that happening anytime soon. But that is kind of one of the downsides to this checking and savings is everything is online, similar to like Ally Bank. As far as I know, Ally does not have any physical locations. You can correct me if I'm wrong on that. Okay, so now let's move on to like the main topic that everybody really cares about for this whole thing, which is that 3% interest. Basically, the way they break it down is they pay it daily for every dollar. So you don't have to have a minimum balance to be supported for this 3% interest. Any kind of amount that you have in there will be getting interest paid out daily. So that interest is supposed to come out to 3% annually. I'm going to say estimate to 3% annually because if you're putting money in and taking it out, I don't know how they're actually going to be able to really calculate that 3% from a certain point since they do break it down on a per day basis. I'm assuming they just took 3% and divided it by like 365 or maybe just the days of like 261 days if you don't count weekends maybe. I don't know the specific details of what that daily covers, but that will be paid out as a small portion. So if you only have this money in the account for a week, you still get a week's worth of interest rate back on every dollar that you had in there. That's pretty awesome. A lot of other banks will only do like an end of year input into your interest rate so that they'll say, okay, at this point in the year you had this much money, so now we're going to give you this 3%. Or I guess they don't do the 3%, but we'll give you this 1% based on the amount you had at this day. So paid daily is kind of neat because then it'll incrementally go up on your average interest rate, or not interest rate, your average interest will go up throughout the year as you put more money in. Like I said, most other banks are between this range. I don't know of anybody besides like Ally that would be, I think they're at 2%. I don't think they're above it. You might get to see some banks start to offer higher rates now that, Robinhood is offering this. But typically this is the range that you'll see in most other banking institutions. So this 3% is really kind of blowing people out of the water right now with the news. Robinhood has an example of how that interest really would work with $8,000 in between your accounts. And the way they kind of pull that is that this Federal Reserve Consumer Finance Survey found that like the median or like the most common amounts that people had in their checking and savings were totaling up to about $8,100. So they said, in the most common checking and savings scenario, you would have around $8,000 and you would make $240 of interest in that year at 3% if you did not touch the account. So if you had $8,000, you put it in at the beginning of the year, a year later, you haven't done anything to it, you'd have $8,240. And that's pretty phenomenal. And especially if like you're adding more to it, like you normally would with other accounts, you will be making more than that. Eventually, you'll maybe put into like $10,000 total and have more than that. $300 interest by the end or somewhere near there. So that's a really good interest rate if you're not too familiar with it. Most of the time, you're probably not going to break like $20 to $50 over the year with whatever bank you have if you have like this amount. So that rate is really something if they can pull it off. I don't know yet how well they'll do, but I think they'll be able to pull it off if they keep the number of people limited. Next, the way they can do this 3% profit is because they have two main profit points that they've set up. The first one is with MasterCard. They have an interchange fee set up with their system. If you're not familiar with an interchange fee, basically every time you do a transaction, the card is with MasterCard, takes a fee from the vendor or supplier of the store that you use this at. So if you use your debit card at like a 7-Eleven and the 7-Eleven gets that money, they have to pay a portion of that charge to MasterCard, and MasterCard is taking a smaller portion of that fee and giving it back to Robinhood because that's kind of the agreement. So it's an incredibly small amount that Robinhood gets every time the card is used, but that stuff really adds up, considering how many users they might have doing this. So that's the first way that they'll be making profit off of this setup. The other is just a standard kind of bank idea where they take the money that's in the account and they put them into different securities and assets like government treasury. That's kind of a really common safe one that a lot of banks will do. It gives them money back as long as they have your money to borrow. So that's pretty much a standard bank thing. It doesn't really change between like Chase, Bank of America. They all do this standard asset interest idea where they take your money out of your checking account, go invest it, and use that interest that they gain from investing it to pay it back to you. And that's pretty much just if you're not familiar with how most banks work, that's how they make their money. So Robinhood's just following that trend. The last thing is kind of the biggest is that they don't have physical locations. They don't pay for like ads on the Super Bowl or TV or physical people taxes on their buildings. None of that is really applied to their expenses, whereas other banks have facilities and locations that they have to pay property tax on every year, and that all costs money. Robinhood is pretty much only electronic. They have maybe like their headquarters somewhere that they have to like set up all this stuff and program with, but they don't have on-site, banks anywhere, so they don't have to pay for any of those expenses. So that's kind of one of the biggest things for them being able to help offer this 3% is they keep everything electronic and digital. So that really saves them a lot of money on some of the actual startup. So that's pretty much how they're able to anticipate offering this 3% interest rate. And based on what I've seen, I think that's a reasonable amount for them considering their plan for this. Again, this is my opinion, so please judge it on your own and do a little more background and reading if you're not sure. But to me, it looks like a solid business plan especially if you are looking to invest a larger amount here. I think it's pretty safe to say that they'll be able to do this return. Next one is for the ATMs. They say they will have over 75,000 in-network ATMs, and if you're not really sure why that's so great, you don't really have like a scale. They gave an example of the 5 major banks combined to have 61,482. That's a number that Robinhood has in those details on its app. If you want to read more, they'll give you that number. But I looked it up as one of them. Bank of America is a bank that I have, and they have over 16,000 ATMs, and they are posted as the number 2 biggest ATM bank currently. So that's like the second biggest amount of ATMs that a bank has, and Robinhood's boasting that they just like blow it out of the water. So I'm very curious to see where all those locations are, but they set that up by having major partners like Allpoint, MoneyPass as a way to like set up a partnership with no fees on all these ATMs. And even with like these 2 big players in there, I'm kind of curious how they set up that many ATMs to be in network. I don't know of any other big partners that they have for it, but I gotta assume there's a few more. But that's still all across 50 states. Every state will have at least one ATM in their network, if not more. But that is something that they have posted is every state has at least one. And that's 75,000 plus throughout the country. That's pretty much it for ATMs. Again, if it's in their network, no fee. You just take your money out. If it's not in their network, but you still have to use it, you can still use that ATM like you would any other. You just get charged a fee for using it. And now on to our final topic, the security aspect, which is kind of a big concern right now, especially after Friday. A lot of people are wondering, how secure can this possibly be to have a 3% annual interest rate for checkings and savings through your broker? First thing that I want to bring up is the credentials for anything that you type in for your account to log in or anything. All that gets hashed by Bcrypt algorithms. I don't know too much about this company, but they are involved with some other securities. I'm gonna assume that they know what they're doing because I'm not smart enough to really understand the specific details of how they encrypt everything. But that is a company you can look into their history and see who else they've worked with if you want to go ahead and dig more into them, see how safe it is. Another thing that they use is whenever there is a communication done across their network between, like an ATM and their headquarters server somewhere to actually complete this transaction at an ATM, that all gets done over TLS protocol. Again, if you want to know a lot more detail about it, you can look it up, but TLS is kind of a common one for communications over secure networks. So I have no problem with them running that. And so these first 2 points right here, I'm comfortable with. In my opinion, I think they're just fine for setting up security. I'm not too worried about anything after that. Other than that, you're pretty much doing the same thing as a standard bank. Um, Next is if you want, you can have the push notifications set up for every transaction. So every time you pull something out of an ATM or withdraw it, you'll get a notification similar to every other banking system where you could say, this was me, this wasn't me. Pretty standard idea at this point in our age. Uh, I again don't really see any difference between that and other banks, so it seems pretty standard. The one thing that I thought was interesting is they say they don't store your credentials and they only use it once for initial authentication, of your bank account. I don't really know how this will work out. I'll probably do a little more digging because at some point they have to have your credentials somewhere so that they can make sure that they align with what you're trying to authenticate at a later time. I don't see a way that they cannot store these somewhere, but I'd be very interested to read a bit more on it. So when you log in and you open up an account, you maybe like transfer your money from one bank to another. They're saying they're not going to keep the credentials from that bank transfer, so like let you log into another bank or something. And I don't know if that just means every time you have to go through authenticating it brand new every time you do a transaction or every time you do a login. I don't know how you'll be able to do repeat authentications and transactions without having something stored. So if you guys have any thoughts on that, please comment them. I'm going to do a little more follow up on this because it is interesting for me to try to think of how they can pull that off. As far as like a little bit more to go in with that is the way they say you can set up, your login or your security authentication. Since they don't store it, they're also saying that you can use fingerprint, standard PIN, or two-factor with an external app. I'm not familiar with any apps, but everybody can do SMS. That's usually where it like sends you a verification code to your phone, and you just plug that in when you're logging in to make sure it like verifies that. So that kind of contradicts this not storing any kind of credentials when you're saying, okay, I have a phone that I want linked to this account, I have a login that I want linked to this account. That type of stuff needs to be stored somewhere so that they know where to send this pin or the text message to. So if you guys have any more knowledge or thoughts on these two together, please comment them below or shoot me a message on it because I am very confused on that part and I have not found more details on it. And now I saved the best part for last. The biggest thing now is the day after they released the news about this, the SIPC released news that they were unaware of Robinhood trying to do a check and cash savings accounts as like a normal bank would, because normally a bank is insured by the FDIC, whereas brokerages are covered by SIPC, which is what Robinhood has claimed they worked out a partnership with the SIPC to cover them for this new release. However, the SIPC is usually only covering cash that's intended for securities and purchasing assets. It's not there to secure, just a cash account that you're not using. So that's not what that insurance is for. And they're claiming that they will not be covering a cash only account that just sits there. They're saying if they cover something, it has to be cash money that's being stored until they can put it to securities to purchase, like stocks, bonds, maybe like property. That is what the SIPC covers. The FDIC covers the banks for cash accounts, um, specifically for just holding cash savings somewhere. So the SIPC and Robinhood need to align on this. My guess is that there will be some stipulation that Robinhood has to put in. They've tried to make it clear that this is not a bank checking account, it is a brokerage checking and savings account. But I don't think that will get them cleared to be covered by the SIPC unless they make some kind of change to say it has to be spent or something within this amount of time. I just don't see how they can get away with just say store your money here and the SIPC will cover it. I don't think they'll let that fly. The SIPC claimed that they did not know of that intention from Robinhood, so it may violate something in written contract. They have passed it on to the SEC, Security Exchange Commission, because they are the ones that actually do the ruling for the SIPC. So SIPC is just insurance, but the SEC is the one that makes those determinations about whether or not something is legal or okay as far as trading goes. But if the SIPC does stay insured for these checkings accounts, that means that you will be covered for $250,000 of cash just sitting in the account up to that much, or $500,000 total, which would include the $250,000 cash and a remaining amount of stocks or bonds that you would have linked to that account. So if you have, honestly, I can't even really compare because I can't imagine having this much money anyways. If they covered just the total account or just the cash, like lower to like 150 or something, I don't care. That's still a ton of cash, more than I have personally. But if they do cover it, then that would be huge for Robinhood to be able to keep pulling in all these customers. But this is something to keep an eye out for over the next coming weeks to see if they can reach an agreement on whether or not they will cover Robinhood's current checking and savings claims, or if Robinhood will have to retract and make an adjustment in order to keep their coverage. So that is kind of the biggest thing going on with this checking and savings news right now. In my opinion, I think Robinhood is going to have to make a slight change because the SIPC, all I've heard is they don't cover cash that just sits there for no reason. I mean, that's pretty much what Robinhood was claiming. Yeah, they said, oh, but it's part of, your brokerage account. That doesn't change the fact that the account is intended for just holding cash without any intent to buy any securities. I know I'm getting a little repetitive here, so I'll stop at that point. But again, do some more research on these. I hope these bullet points helped give you some idea of every aspect of the account. If you were interested, again, I'll post some links to some of these things where it just like tells you what is FDIC, what is SIPC. The difference is, pretty standard and easy to understand. You can look them up. Some more information about the headlines for the 3% and whether or not the SIPC sees if they'll go bankrupt or close because of that, or whether or not they'll protect it. Right here you can see SIPC protects with the purpose of purchasing securities. So that kind of information, I'll post some of these links too. But if you type in Robinhood checking and savings right now, pretty much all of these documents will show up on Google, or these websites will, because it's such a big topic. So again, thanks for watching, guys. I hope you found some of this information useful. I'll post all those links there. And if you have any more knowledge or comments, questions about some of these details, please post them and I will do my best to answer them and look into more information on some of the points that I didn't have right now. So thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.